Good morning, my friends. This is Deepak, and I'm back with you. And I hope you can. I've tried everything, and now I'm using these wonderful ear pods or ear pads or whatever you call them. So I hope the sound is better. I want to continue in our discussion today on solving the mystery of death. As you know, I've focused in the last several weeks on the nature of fundamental reality, the nature of fundamental existence, the nature of our being, and how by actually understanding our nature, we can face directly what people call existential anxiety and the fear of death and even human suffering, to face it in all its dimensions and then go beyond it. That is the goal here. So even while the COVID-19 pandemic rages and is hopefully coming under control with the curve flattening out and then decreasing, hopefully soon we will move beyond this pandemic with a few lessons learned. But in the meanwhile, this issue of human suffering and existential anxiety and the fear of death always remains. As long as you're human, that is going to be an experience for you at some point, unless you're prepared. And if you're prepared, then of course, just know this mystery of death, of birth, of life, of existence, and experientially understand it, what could be greater? So today I want to start with what I said as I started this communication with you. What I typed out was, in order to solve the mystery of existence, you have to overcome the superstition of matter. In order to solve the mystery of existence, you have to overcome the superstition of matter and understand that only the invisible is real. Only the invisible is fundamentally real. The visible is real when experienced. The visible is feels real. The physical or the visible or the perceptible feels real when it is being experienced, but it is not fundamental truth. And our science, our contemporary science today, is based on what in the philosophy of science is referred to as naive realism. Naive realism. So at some point, you might want to look it up, on the internet, what naive realism means, what it means. But if you understand the philosophy of science that talks about naive realism, then you will actually understand that even some of our most brilliant scientists, like Einstein or Isaac Newton, they were naive realists. In other words, they came up with amazing models of reality that have been very useful. Einstein's insights allow us to put telescopes in satellites outside the atmosphere in space and allow us to develop GPS systems and also connect with each other, on and on. Every modern technology is based on the insights of physicists, classical physicists like Einstein, theories of relativity, both general theory of relativity and special theory of relativity that describes our experience of cosmic events, and why we experience them, the way we experience them. And then quantum mechanics, which looks at even more fundamental levels of micro reality that give us a completely different picture, which is quite non-intuitive if we base all our thinking on perceptions, or should I say regular perceptions, not perceptions provided to us through ultra microscopic stroboscopic devices like the Hadron Collider, etc., atom smashers. But all these very brilliant insights are still based on the philosophy of naive realism. And the philosophy of naive realism has many assumptions, many assumptions. And these assumptions are fundamentally assumptions. They don't indicate radical truth of any kind. Despite the great success of science and rational thought and mathematics, these assumptions do not point to a fundamental truth. So what is the philosophy of naive realism? Let me share with you the most important tenets of naive realism. The first is that matter, number one assumption, matter is the ontological primitive of the universe, which means matter is the beginning of the universe. But of course, if you ask physicists or anybody, cognitive scientists, has anyone actually experienced the existence of a substance called matter? And the answer is no. We only experience our perceptions. Matter is a human construct for perceptions based on human questions and human modeling. So that assumption doesn't seem right, that matter is the ontological primitive. The second assumption of naive realism is what we call the subject-object split. So there's you, the subject of experience, and everything else, the object of experience. There's me, Deepak Chopra, the subject of experience, and the universe is the object of experience, and that includes you as well, because you are the objects of my experience. Well, that doesn't seem right, that assumption. After all, you and I are activities of the universe itself. Where is the subject-object split? Can we step outside the universe to observe it? Or are we the universe observing itself through a human nervous system? So the assumption of subject-object split also doesn't seem right. The third assumption of naive realism, and therefore most of today's science, is that empirical facts are reality. We take empirical facts as reality. But let's examine what is an empirical fact. You know, the famous quantum physicist Heisenberg. Heisenberg said, nature does not, and I'm kindly, in a way, paraphrasing Heisenberg. Heisenberg said, nature never reveals herself to us as she is, but as exposed to our methods of questioning. While that is a profound statement, actually, it's not totally accurate. We don't ask questions of nature, we ask questions of ourselves. Okay? That's the only person we can ask a question of, ourselves. And then we attribute that this is what we are asking nature. Then what we do is we set up experiments based on the questions we are asking. Is this a wave? Is this a particle? Okay, what is the nature of the particle? Is it probability in Hilbert space or whatever. So what kind of experiment should be set up? What kind of devices should be used? In fact, naive realism is also part of a philosophy called instrumentalism. So we set up the questions that we ask ourselves. We design the experiments ourselves. We design the methods of observation ourselves. Then we observe flashes or snapshots of perceptual activity, space-time events in consciousness, snapshots. And we call them particles, and then we say these build the universe through their random movement. Never mind that the universe has precise mathematical laws and regularities of experience that we call natural laws. So we made up the whole thing. Empirical facts do not indicate reality, but are a species-specific mode of knowing and experience to questions asked by human beings who use human brains to look at events in consciousness, designing fancy experiments that cost billions of dollars. We call these snapshots of perceptual activity empirical facts, and then we build science around that, which is also actually very useful because based on that we create technology. But these empirical facts are not asking a very important question: who's observing, what is observing, why those particular questions, why those particular experiments, and is this a fact of fundamental reality, empirical fact, or is it a model of a human mode of knowing and experience? So taking empirical facts as evidence of truth, truth with a capital T, seems not valid. The fourth assumption of in naive realism is that the mind is personal, but the world is objective and impersonal. Well, the mind does appear personal. After all, my thoughts are mine. I think, in fact, when I look at my thoughts, though, I find that they are mostly recycled everybody else's thoughts. I believe that the perceptions are mine, but actually, all human beings have learned, or should I say, most human beings, at least in Western societies, have learned to perceive in a particular manner and interpret their perceptions in a particular manner, giving rise to feelings and thoughts and images. And that's what we call cognition. So we say cognition is personal. Cognition means modes of knowing, understanding, perceiving, thinking, modeling, even imagination. So this is all personal, but when I consult you, it seems like you have similar thoughts and not exactly in the same way, but possibly a different point of view around similar perceptions. So actually the mind is not personal, it is a point of view that is personal. But the mind is recycled, social mind, collective mind, human mind, etc. No idea about the mind of other creatures, from caterpillars to swans, to ducks, to eagles, to dinosaurs when they existed, to insects, to butterflies, to giraffes, elephants, hippopotamus, camel. So, how can we say mind is personal? Mind is part of a matrix of collective mind, and beyond collective mind, mind is part of a matrix of universal mind, cosmic mind, if you want to call that. So that's another assumption that naive realism, in a sense, holds. My thoughts and feelings are somewhere inside my head, and the world is somewhere outside my head, when in fact the idea of thoughts, feelings, images, heads, and the world and the body is all in awareness, which is invisible. So assumption number 4 seems wrong. Mind is personal, the world is objective. Assumption number 5, the physical world exists exactly as it is, perceived by the human senses. Okay, but we know that the human senses is a narrow bandwidth of perceptual activity. How can we assume the physical world exists exactly within that bandwidth of perceptual activity? It doesn't seem reasonable. There are bandwidths of perceptual activity that other biological organisms have. So, what is the world they see? Assumption number 5 seems wrong. The physical world exists exactly as it is. Assumption number 6, the physical world would exist exactly as perceived by the 5 human senses, even if there were no conscious beings, never mind humans, but no conscious beings to observe it. The physical world would still exist exactly as it is perceived by the 5 human senses. Well, that assumption can neither be validated nor falsified. So, what is reality? Is there such a thing as physical reality? Understanding the philosophy of naive realism says that there is no such thing. There is no such thing as physical reality. So, yet all our logic, all our rationality is based on assuming that perceptual activity, human perceptual activity, is the physical universe. That's naive realism. And based on that, we create rational thought. And if anyone kind of veers away from that rational thought, he or she is either a psychotic or a genius or a savant or a sage or a rishi. That's the razor's edge, the thin razor's edge that those who explore fundamental reality must tread, because that razor's edge is shared and exists in entangled experiences between sages, psychotics, geniuses, savants, rishis, and explorers of truth. So, I think I made the case that matter is a useful human superstition. And once we understand that matter is a useful superstition, that the only reality is invisible and amorphous and probabilistic and a cloud of possibilities, that is awareness without shape, without form, without color, without sound, without texture, without sensation. Once we understand that and embrace the notion that only the invisible, only the formless, only the borderless, only the unimaginable, inconceivable is real, then everything is easily solved, including our fears of death and anxiety, etc., etc. So, many years ago, when I was still a medical student, I came across a very interesting experiment that was done by Nobel laureate cognitive scientists, neuroscientists. And this experiment, and again, I'm kind of paraphrasing what they exactly did, but something like this. They brought up a group of kittens in a room that had only horizontal stripes. And then they brought up another group, or raised another group of kittens that were brought up in a room that had only vertical stripes. When these kittens grew up to be wise old cats, then one group of cats could only experience a horizontal world. The other group of cats could only see a vertical world. It had nothing to do with their belief systems. When their brains were looked at, they had the connections between neurons only to see a vertical world or a horizontal world. The vertical world was not available to one group of cats. In the horizontal world was not available to the other group of cats. And this phenomenon has also been called premature cognitive commitment. At a very early stage of our lives, we are exposed to colors, shapes, and forms. They're given names and labels. They become the objects of our experience. And that's all we think. We think that's real, but I, who's perceiving that, is not real. Because I is invisible. I can't be seen. And yet without I, this can't be seen. And that is what the Vedanta says. The cause of all ignorance is to consider the world as real and yourself as unreal. Once again, the cause of all ignorance is to consider the world as real and yourself as unreal. That is the cause of all ignorance and all suffering. And the reason you consider yourself unreal is you can't see yourself. You can't see your real self. You can see your body and you can see your facial expressions and gestures, which indicate what's happening in the mind in a mirror, but you can't actually see that which is seen. That's why the Vedanta says also that if you can see it, if you can perceive it, if you can touch it, if you can taste it, if you can smell it, if you can think about it, if you can imagine it, if you can conceptualize it, if you can visualize it, if you can sense it, it is not real. What is real is the invisible self that is seeing, perceiving, hearing, touching, tasting, sensing, conceptualizing, and imagining. And yet, you and I were brought up to believe that the physical world is real, empirical facts are real, and my imagination is not real. Why is it not real? I experience my imagination in the same way as I experience this. It's a modified form in myself as a perceptual activity. It is this shape, color. It is this sensation. It is this sound, this smell, this taste, and that is a modification of myself. And if I close my eyes and I imagine that cup, that also is a modification of myself. So images, memories, perceptions, feelings, thoughts. I like this coffee, I don't like this coffee. They're all entangled as modified expressions of the self, which is invisible. So the visible is not possible unless we are invisible. The visible and the invisible are complementarities. The manifest and the unmanifest are complementarities. Now look at all the things that humans have imagined which presumably don't exist. Okay, we imagined ghosts, angels, divine beings, asuras, demonic beings, all kinds of images. We imagined griffins and dwarfs and unlikely beings that are half human, half animal, etc., etc. But we've never experienced these things perceptually. And yet, in cosmic imagination, see what exists potentially. What exists in cosmic imagination is a giraffe. What an unlikely anatomy. Or a giraffe looks like it shouldn't look like what it looks like, or a hippopotamus, or in the past, dinosaurs, these huge flying creatures. Okay. A butterfly, a hummingbird, a snake, a dolphin. These are all amazingly imagined creatures in cosmic consciousness. Now, our consciousness, being an expression of that consciousness, imagine is unlikely creatures too. Are they real? Well, they are real as imaginal experiences, but not real as perceptual experiences. Why aren't they real as perceptual experiences? Because premature cognitive commitment. That's it. We don't see what's out there. We see only what is we believe is out there. So once again, we don't see what is out there. We only see what we believe is out there. Everything else is edited. Furthermore, there is no outwhere. The perceptual activity is happening within consciousness. The interpretation of that is happening within consciousness. The imagination of what is possible is happening within consciousness. And also perceptual activity, as you know, is unreliable. It tells you the earth is flat, the ground is stationary. Yes, it feels that way. When I'm walking on the earth, it feels flat. So on one level, that's real. On another level, seeing it from far away in space, the earth is spinning at dizzying speeds and hurtling through space at thousands of miles an hour. My body looks like at this moment, this perceptual snapshot, but it has had all kinds of forms, some that I don't remember. Like, I don't remember the form I had as an embryo, although I can imagine it. And I can imagine it because somebody had that experience, and now, of course, I can have that experience through an ultrasound as well, which is a creation of human consciousness. So, is my body solid? Flesh and bones? Yes, on a perceptual level it is, but even that is changing and morphing every moment. Is my body energy and information? At a certain level it is. Is my body force fields and particles and atoms? On some level, that's true. Is my body totally empty, formless, spaceless and timeless and dimensionless and infinite? That too is true at one level. So I think it becomes clear that if we want to solve the mystery of our existence and the mystery of our life, or the mystery of birth or death, then we have to go beyond the philosophy of naive realism. Now, I had made some notes that I think I should share with you right now. One is that you actually never perceive what is happening. You never perceive what is happening. You perceive what has already happened. So right now, the words I'm using to impart this information to you, by the time you hear them, they don't exist. The snapshot of perception that gives you the experience of Deepak Chopra right now, by the time you see me as this image, because it takes a little time for electromagnetic activity, for photons to travel through cyberspace very fast, but by the time you see me, what you saw doesn't exist. So you only experience the past. Only experience the past. And even the past that you experience is a memory. And that memory, it does not exist till you construct it. So every act of perception, you create physical reality. Every act of perception, you create physical reality by projecting a memory into a field of possibilities. And what are the possibilities? Entangled colors, entangled sensations, entangled sounds, tastes, smells, textures, given meaning, and a word, coffee cup, coffee. That's it. You are creating the universe right now, including your body right now. So you did it before, you're doing it now, you'll do it after the body disappears. What's the big deal? Because you are invisible, formless, infinite, and capable of imagining anything into existence, provided you're not stuck with the rational thought which comes from the superstition of matter. So, what do you trust? Do you trust irrational thought? Well, quantum mechanics seems totally irrational from a perspective of rational thought, which is based on perceptual observations, which we now know are totally unreliable. But is quantum mechanics reliable? It's also based on interpretation of snapshots of perception using amazing devices. So if this is not reliable, why is quantum mechanics reliable? It's just another modeling, and the modeling occurs in human consciousness. And the only thing that's real is the consciousness that conceives, governs, constructs, and becomes this perceived reality, which is transient, That's why the greatest thinkers of all time has said thought is also unreliable, because thought is based on the interpretation of perceptual experience. Doesn't matter how refined that perceptual experience is. Is imagination reliable? Well, imagination comes as a result of memory, and we have no idea where that memory is because it doesn't exist as a cellular level in your neurons, even though your neurons get activated when you retrieve the memory. Memory only exists as possibilities till you retrieve it. And so where is memory? That's one of the hard problems of consciousness. Memory is just modified reconstruction of experience now, of an experience that happened in the past, but that experience which happened in the past was also an experience of the past through a memory of its past. And that memory was not in the physical dimensionality of time. It's pretty weird, but it's also pretty extraordinary. Because what I'm saying here is, if you can imagine it, if you can think of it and conceive it, on one level it's not real, but on another level it's real as a transient experience. And that experience is an image, a thought, a feeling, a perception, a sensation. Who's generating it? I am, is generating it. So this is the basis of some very profound ideas in the philosophy of non-dualism, Kashmir-Shaivism, Vedanta, aspects of Buddhism, and the non-dual philosophies of the West as well, going back to Plato and before. So what do they all say? They all say that real and unreal are complementarities. Manifest and unmanifest are complementarities. Invisible and visible are complementarities. Solid and vacuum are complementarities. Just in the way up and down are complementarities. Pleasure and pain are complementarities. Birth and death are complementarities. Joy and suffering are complementarities. Sinner and saint are complementarities. Sacred and profane are complementarities. All on the screen of consciousness, modifying itself into infinite modes of knowing, infinite knowers, and infinite objects known, infinite seers, infinite modes of seeing, infinite sceneries, all coexisting in superposition as entangled possibilities. Entangled possibilities. So whatever you can imagine, at some point you can experience. or it will be an experience. First in imagination, in the subtle body, and then, of course, always existing in the causal body as the entanglement of possibilities. What you're seeing as Deepak Chopra's body right now is one version in virtual reality of many versions of this body, many, including non-human versions, griffins and angels and divine beings and asuras and devas, you name it, goblins, all coexist as entangled possibilities, first as entangled possible images, and then as entangled possible perceptions, and then entangled possible interpretations of those perceptions that we call reality. Going back to Rumi's poem, when I die, I will soar with angels, and when I die to the angels, what I shall become, I cannot imagine. So, my dear friends, everyday reality is a projection of belief. It's a projection of a thought that is held to be true, but is not necessarily true. It's just true because we hold it to be true. There are techniques of yoga nidra, astral projection, projection into the other worlds, experiences of other loci or locations. Loci is locations, not in space-time and the theater of causality, but a location as a possible frequency dimension in consciousness, giving rise to perceptual experiences that we have not had. So yoga nidra, astral projection, near-death experiences, cultural beliefs, cultural expectations, all give rise to the experience of what we call reality. Out of the invisible real, you create the visible unreal. And furthermore, you never experience absolute reality, only the imagined, constructed past and a perceptual reality. And you also then project an imagined future, which is mental activity in the absence yet of perceptual activity. But mental activity is also an aspect of perceptual activity, just like perceptual activity is an aspect of mental activity. So perceptual and mental are also complementarities. So we conclude today with the same conclusion. You want to solve the mystery of death, get rid of the superstition of matter, experience your invisible formless self through yoga nidra, through meditation, through mindful awareness of thought, through mindful awareness of perception, of images, of feelings, of sensations, of emotions. Recognize that you are the silent witnessing awareness, modifying itself to all these experiences. And no one experience is superior to the other. The experience of a physical world as perceptual activity is as unreliable as the experience of an image in consciousness or in imagination, as unreliable, but as real, as an experience, not indicating fundamental truth. And only knowing fundamental truth can get you beyond the superstition of matter, the assumption that rational thought is the window to reality, and the deep ignorance that what we see is real, but that which is seen is not real. The deep ignorance that the world is real, including the body, is real, but you The invisible, formless, infinite being is not real. That is the mistake of the intellect that we need to correct if we want to explore the mystery of our death and what is possible as experience beyond that. But first, we have to get rid of superstition. So, what's today's mantra? What I'm going to make up one. Om Jagat Mithya. Om is the cosmic I am. Om Jagat Mithya. Jagat, world appearance. Mithya, appearance. Jagat means world. Om Jagat Mithya. I am the cosmic being projecting this universe as my cosmic dream. Come and join me in the cosmic dream. And if you don't join me, I'll visit you anyway. This is what the non-local mind is telling us. Mantra once again. Om Jagat Mithya. Monica first says, I'm creating you. Yeah, actually, that's in the Vedanta. Dear ones, in our fancy, we have created each other. This is the freedom that we have to create, which is also called moksha. We would have chosen that as a mantra today. But let's stay with Om Jagat Mithya. Take care and see you tomorrow.